And welcome back to Ed the Pagan Show. And I want to thank everybody who's been around and allowing me to do these interviews. And as you know, we're digging deeper and deeper. To answer one question, why am I not doing the eldermost? Well, because the people I really want to talk to are people I've met over the year who are doing great leadership. And Katarina Elaine is one of the people that I've met. I met her years ago as an artist. She did beautiful paintings and things like that. And when she was working in one of Kansas City's main bookstores. And she was doing great there. Now she's gone on to do a lot of things. The things that she's most known for is Temple Scarlet. If you don't know what it is, I'll let her explain it. But she's been doing Viking Fest. She restarted, helped with a group of solid people. No, nobody ever does this completely alone. Pagan Pride, which I went to at Kansas City Pagan Pride, which was one of my favorites this year. And so there's always this energy around her, and you've seen her interview before and things like that. But we haven't talked to her in a while, so I wanted to catch up and the things we're talking about. I think she is like one of the more distinct voices that needs to be heard. So here we go. Hi, Katerina.
Hey Ed.
There you go. So basically, so you were mentioning before we got on the air, Temple Scarlet. It seems to be one of the things you're most known for. I really like the Viking Fest stuff. We'll get into that. You've been doing some great imagery with that as a queen, or what is it called?
A Jarl.
Well, Jarl. Uh,
Jarl.
but so I know nothing about that stuff, so that's good. But Temple Scarlet has always been to me what I've seen and what's inspired me with it at a distance is the fact that's completely inclusive community that's consent based. And that you're trying to
Yes.
teach, not only teaching consent, but you're teaching it to leadership to develop consent. Can you explain a little bit more? Have I got that kind of right?
Yeah, consent is going to be the core foundation that Temple Scarlet is built upon. And Temple Scarlet does have a far-reaching reputation, I would say, of the things I'm involved with. It does make the most impact. And that's interesting because the actual Temple Scarlet retreat is incredibly small. We cap it to 50 or 60 people, but the focus is so much on a in-depth, intense, quality, transformative experience that the people who come out of that retreat end up really just talking about it, and it's grown almost larger than life in the minds of the community because it is such an intense experience. So Temple Scarlet deals with sacred sexuality, which is kind of a combination of like spirituality and sex positivity, and working with those two things together, understanding the ways that sexuality can be sacred, and also a lot of, I mean, obviously, the only way to do that is consent, right? So our focus starts with doing consent, doing boundaries, talking about how consent is not just sexual, it's not just about sex acts, but it's about our everyday life, and it's involved with everything. And we also do a lot of trauma processing, a lot of healing for people who've had negative experiences in those areas. And that becomes our main focus. And out of that, people end up feeling very healed and empowered and stronger to go and even get involved in other aspects of the community. A surprising amount of leaders have come out of Temple Scarlet. I think healing that aspect of ourselves allows us to become more and manifest more in the world.
And that's very interesting. Earlier, we had an interview with Shane Nelson, who did the survey on pagan religious trauma, and he said
Mhm.
89% of our community carries some form of religious trauma. And 68% still carried into their practice as a pagan, even if it came from an outside faith. So Shane Nelson gave those the numbers. Check that interview out. It's amazing. And you sounds like you're working right in that, like that Venn diagram of sorts of that trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Those numbers, I would say, back up what I have experienced is
Hmm.
that people experience a lot of religious trauma, and some of it is very sexual in nature. And they do bring it into paganism with them. And sometimes they struggle to kind of unlearn and heal all of that. And also, sometimes they have experienced that trauma in paganism. particularly in kind of the like 2010s era, at least here in my local era, when the community, the pagan community, was vast. There were a lot of people. There was an influx of growth very quickly. Um, and because of that, we kind of lost the ability to keep everything safe. There wasn't as much vetting going on. Like it just got very large, and some of these little groups were able to harm people religiously, to kind of find people at events and take them off into sort of little cults, and do things that are inappropriate and not be checking in with the community. You know, with those numbers, when you have a festival of hundreds and hundreds, you can't keep track of everyone. And that's why Temple Scarlet caps it to be in such a small group, actually. But as a response,
Okay.
we just do it more frequently so that we can work in small numbers and do it twice a year.
There you go. That's a good way of doing it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's out in Kansas City. So let me go ahead and let's talk about that Viking Fest stuff. I know nothing about Viking Fest other than it looks like a lot of fun. Um, but it does look like it's also a serious practice too, as underneath there. Am I not seeing that correct?
Yeah, Viking Fest is interesting. It's only on year two, so this is second year of Viking
Right.
Fest. And in its inception, it isn't a pagan specific event.
Hmm.
The organizers are gamers, tabletop gamers, LARPers,
Hmm.
which, as a lot of pagans do know or should know, we kind of grew out of the sci-fi community. We kind of grew out of the pagan community. Our festivals and our culture experienced a huge boom during the time when Renfests and sci-fi conventions were also experiencing a boom. So we've always kind of worked hand in hand with those communities. And to me, it feels a little like going back to our roots, to be in line with this community and for them to have made this space that is not particularly pagan, but allows for a lot of pagans to come in this in between space and kind of meet up with each other, experience a little bit of Norse paganism, the Norse experience, talk about the gods, wear their Viking clothes. So it's been a really fantastic experience, and I have been thoroughly surprised by the amount of magic that is in the Viking Fest experience. Completely surprised by how magical it has been for me, despite expecting it to be just secular.
Well, I do think that we're re-examining the Viking. I mean, from an archaeological standpoint, going from
Mm-hmm.
the idea of, I hate to say it, the tech bros idea of the big hulking white and red-haired guy and guys
Mm-hmm.
that come rampaging to this sort of diverse multicultural society. I mean, people didn't know
Yeah.
that, and you're reflecting that. And the other part, it was a job. It was as much a job or a thing, and women had a lot more control than they want to give it into it. You know, bathing. There was a lot of things that about Vikings. They were a pretty advanced culture, um, and so. But I also feel like people are coming back to it. I think part of it's comics. I've heard about Marvel, the idea of it, the idea of the Norse
Mm-hmm.
gods coming back, and even the egregores of that, the idea of the American gods and things of that nature. So I think it's a fantastic idea. The other, because you see that we do love these places where we can be different, that we can be more like something else. Can you talk
Yeah,
to?
and I think one of the things Viking Fest is doing incredibly well is they're
Mhm.
being clear about the fact that they aren't a historical reenactment and that they are a reimagining, they are a kind of LARP oriented event. And from there, they're able to be incredibly inclusive and really promote inclusivity. And the organizers have been really safe, really anti fascist. I've gotten involved with organizing this year for the first time. So I'm just kind of barely getting into the group. But
Mhm.
they've been fantastic about that. We had Heathens Against Racism came out this year and did a class at Viking Fest. And I felt really good about that. So for the start of a new event, I think we're off to a fantastic start with really good roots and a really interesting, really inclusive space.
Well, we'll find out more about that later this year as it comes along. We'll be sharing it
Absolutely.
um,
Hmm.
as as we go on to this idea daily. But let's go ahead and start. So a lot of younger people are trying to get into the community, and I want to know a little bit if you would be happy to tell us your story. How did you get involved with the community?
Oh, that is interesting.
Hmm.
Um, to tell you the truth, I was in a place in my life where I had experienced some of that religious trauma, and I had kind of, I'd been raised in Christianity, but I'd set that aside and I'd given up on religion as a whole.
Hmm.
Um, and I started having dreams about being a witch. So that was a very interesting experience to have. And I was like, well, what is all this about? And then I started researching it myself and kind of discovered Wicca. The first two books I discovered were, of course, Cunningham's Wicca for the Solitary
Hmm.
Practitioner, being the most popular one out there. It's the one that most people start up with. And then also Witchcrafting by Phyllis Currit was my second book that I ever read. About witchcraft, and fell in love with witchcraft, fell in love with Wicca, and went from there. Ended up traveling to Ireland and living there for a little while and studying with a couple there and really just diving into it.
So you actually, once you got started, you actually had an apprenticeship in Ireland
I
of
wouldn't
sorts.
say it was that formal,
Okay.
but I had mentors that were there to me for me
Hmm.
and encouraged me to explore actually not only paganism but my various interests. They encouraged me to get prints of my art and sell them. They had a shop in Ireland, and so it was a it was a stall technically. So they have like weekend
Hmm.
farmer market type things that are more common in Europe, and but they have all kinds of things that they sell and they're very regular. So on that weekend market I would be at their stall, and sometimes I would sell my artwork and I would help them and learn from them. And they encouraged me to read. They had a very large library of pagan books that I could read from because they did have that shop. So, and then from that step, they were not the last mentors. I think of
Hmm.
Ted and Tina fondly. Um, if you ever are in Galway, Ireland, and you run into a pagan stall in the market, say hi to Ted and Tina O'Connor. Love them to death. But after that, I returned to the States for a couple years, was solitary, and then just kept finding more mentors. And I know it was different for me because I sought out the mentors so persistently, and I tried to learn from a variety of sources. So I was never looking to be taken under one person's wing and showed all the mysteries. That's for fantasy books. I was looking for any older adult with any experience to just listen and learn from what they had to tell me, and then I would judge that for myself as to whether or not that was helpful or true or ethical. So I had a lot of mentors after that. But I have always been somewhat uniquely able to kind of walk between the generations. And it has a little to do
Hmm.
with my Christian upbringing. My dad was actually a preacher. So we had, obviously a lot of elderly people in the church growing up. So I was very able to find the elders and kind of befriend them and talk to them as much as I am able to go and talk to the people who are younger who now think that I'm very cool and very aesthetic.
And actually, I hear that a lot. You are, you are somebody that the eye is attracted to in the sense that you got this great energy. And I'm not just talking about this physical, but you have this
Thank
emotional
you.
energy. You do have this emotional energy that does catch the eye, this sort of aura about you that does catch the eye.
Mhm.
And it feels something that you've obviously cultivated, but it feels something that tickles the mind of a lot of people that could there be really witches? You're one of the few people I know that when people said, yeah, she could be a witch, you mean a lot of us practice and go, oh, yeah, you're not. But no one doubts you of it. So this is something about your authentic energy. Hmm? See, she has a cat.
Yeah, and I think on some level, and this is one of the things my Ireland mentors sort of taught me, I learned to project it not only in my appearance, um, but in my energy on a sense because I wanted other people to find it, and I wanted other people who were seeking witchcraft, who were seeking paganism, to see that in me so that maybe I could point them in the right direction.
Hmm.
And so the way that I project I am a witch is very intentional.
Hmm.
There's almost nothing I love more than having some young person walk up to me and go, "Do you read tarot?" Because I look like I read tarot. So that makes me very happy, and then I'm able to say yes, and we have a discussion.
And there you go. And that's what leads me to my next question. Right now, I'm finding one of the things is I ask tons of questions. Every day I ask questions. People will go like, "Why do you keep asking questions?" Well, because I meet great people.
That's a
And
sign of intelligence. Keep
well, that's
asking
right, guy.
questions.
I'm infinitely curious, but
Mhm.
I don't study paganism as much as I understand pagans. And one of the things, because you're probably a millennial, you've mentioned that, and right now we're
I
seeing,
am 33 this year,
congratulations,
going on 34 soon.
congratulations. I mean, I tell people all the time to go, because I myself got started pretty early for my
Hmm.
generation, which was an extras. But now I'm seeing more and more divide between the generations. It seems like they're not communicating their training as well. You got into training because you went after it more than
Hmm.
you weren't passive. And I
And
know
it
some,
was difficult to do. There was a lot of gatekeeping. I really had to break down some gates to get what I was looking for. And I would say I still didn't receive as much of the training as I wanted and would have liked to.
so the elder motes are now going off on their things, and you don't see a lot of roots to their organizations. Nothing
Hmm.
against them, but Church of All Worlds pretty shallow for being around for a long time under Oberon Zell. Phyllis Crosby's got this great group of women, but it's, a couple of groups. You don't see large organizations around what we call the eldermost or the boomer generation. They're not having heirs as much. They've argued with me about it, but we don't know who they are. We don't see that sort of encouragement, and we haven't seen it. Gardner, we know very few, a little bit of the. Once you got past the first two or three generations, we lost track of that.
Hmm.
But you were talking about that. You feel like that a lot of the information wasn't passed on. They really didn't prepare for community as a whole.
Yeah, at
Am I
least
understand that
in
right?
the Yeah, at least in the Kansas City area, the people of my generation and older, the people that are kind of in their like later 40s, that I
Hmm.
have talked to, all have these very similar stories about a time when they were working with an elder and they were kind of learning a festival, a trade, they were learning some kind of thing, and they were getting ready to take it over, but the past never happened. There ended up being ghosting, there ended up being conflict. The older generation didn't ultimately hand that down and allow the younger generations to step up. And they had reasons, because I've heard this from the perspective of the older elders as well. And every time I hear it, they all are like, well, the people we were working with didn't this enough, the people we were working with didn't that enough. They all justified it with some kind of reason.
Hmm.
But regardless, there's this period of like 5 or 10 years in Kansas City where nothing was passed down to the next generation, and then there was just a lot of conflict and infighting, and then things just died. And there are other things that were going on there. There were
I just
some
lost your
unethical
voice.
practices. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Unmute.
Mm,
There we go.
got
There we
it.
go. Yeah.
Okay.
So as you were saying, is that there was this, like this 5 or 10 period in Kansas City, and I will say it happened. I would say over a 20-year period in different spaces, meaning a 5 or 10 period, but in
Hmm.
different spaces that this did happen. I mean, I hear it now, and I still and I'm still not hearing about this transition going on well. And now we have
Hmm.
we have two generations now. Generation Z was uh, seeped deeply in magic from their televisions, from their shows, from pop culture. There's a lot of this, and you were pretty steeped in it too. I mean, you had a lot of pop culture, witchcraft, and magic as you were growing up.
Yeah, and I think the pop culture is almost a way of teaching the younger generations in the only way that we know how. Because those torches weren't very well passed,
Hmm.
we picked up enough of it, but not enough to sort of do the rites of passage and the formal training and to run the groups and run the events that we needed to. But yeah, there's a lot of magic in pop culture that you can learn from, and that's always been true for pagans and
Hmm.
Wiccans. A lot, yeah. I mean, Gardner wrote fantasy books, so a lot of our teaching, Starhawk did as well, and honestly, Starhawk's nonfiction novels are among my favorite. But a lot of our teaching has always been in the form of like fictional stories and movies and shows, and there is a lot to be learned from that, but it's not everything, right? You learn a lot of metaphorical lessons, but you don't learn the technique, you don't learn the customs, you don't learn the experiential lessons that have to be had.
So, in this process, and I know that you're working on Temple Scarlet and other similar places, you do teach. If you ever get a chance to listen to anything she talks, she's logical, she's passionate, and she has this sort of bit of chaos that you want in magic in a way
Mm,
that you can be understanding it. Anyone who tells you magic is a science really are missing part, in my opinion, part of the fun, which is the chaos part of it. The little bit of you don't know what's going to happen, the searching of the unknown. Uh,
yeah.
and so, because you've worked in the past, and I don't know where you're at with it now. You've worked with Camp Gaia and Heartland and all those festivals out there in that area.
Yeah, I have. Camp Gaia is, from what I can tell, one of the oldest pagan campgrounds, at least for in the Midwest. And
It is.
so that puts us in a uniquely horrible situation of
Mm-hmm.
being trailblazers,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And so when our community is going through these cycles, because I've looked at this often, there's not a lot of people we can turn to be like, well, how did that community do it? How did that place handle the passing of the generations? Um, Not a lot of places we can turn to find help for that. So we're having to sort of like figure it out. And I've really enjoyed being a part of that community, all the ups and
Mm-hmm.
downs, all the figuring it out.
It is something pretty unique. I was there in 2012, I remember, when
Mm,
I was doing my reporter gig and they brought me out to do the story of them paying off the property. That was some major movement. And the only really two that I know is Wisteria and Camp Guy that's actually open for festivals. There's a few other places, their own, but they are not group owned as a general rule. They're owned by individuals or by single organizations for the purposes,
mhm.
which makes Gaia um, pretty unique. But I know that's not your story completely, but I do know that as a leader that you've
Yeah.
gone out and worked with
Well,
that.
now it's 2026, and we have a lot of new people in the world that are struggling to even find the Gaia exists. Um, we have that whole generation of people who went through the pandemic, and that is caused a certain kind of gap in their
Hmm.
learning of paganism and Wicca to some extent.
And so now going forward, let me go ahead and put this going forward. One, where do you think the community, not yourself, but where do you think the community should be doing, kind of patching some of this up, as an advisor, as some sort of over from the macro? Hmm? What do you think the community should be doing to kind of fix these generational gaps?
I have a lot of opinions about that. I'm glad you asked. Um,
Hmm.
so, okay, we have in our younger generations two kinds of young people. And one kind is that there are going to be younger people like in their early 20s who grew up in pagan households and are multi-generational households. and they have already been technically practicing and experiencing witchcraft probably longer than me, because they've been doing it ever since they were little children. So the first thing is that you cannot assume that a young person is a beginner. You can't
Hmm.
assume that about them. You have to take a moment to sort of stop and ask them. I remember at a laid back Labor Day a couple years back, we had all of the elders come up on stage to sort of acknowledge them and clap for them. And what they said in the announcement to bring the elders up on stage was like, if you've been coming to Camp Gaia for 20 years, come up on stage. Well, we had a 22-year-old that came up on stage. And if you think about that and you go, wow, her parents had been bringing her out here since she was just a baby. And so technically she has the same amount of like festival experience and witchcraft experience as all the rest of these adults on this stage, as all of the people who are that much older than her. That's something we have to keep in mind when working with the younger generations, is that there is a section of these younger people who are so experienced. But the other group of people in the younger generations is the group that kind of only has experienced paganism and witchcraft on the internet. And the pandemic had a lot to do with that, not just the years that we were actually shut in due to the pandemic, but also the fact that so many events and groups and organizations shut down during the pandemic and either didn't open again at all or took a long time to reopen. So think about if you were a young witch and your only experience was on the internet, what do they have access to? Well, they can buy anything. They can buy tools and trinkets very easily. The trinkets are very easy to get on the internet. They also have information. They can order books, they can take webinars about tarot. The info they have, like all of that, are things that they have easy access to. So when I say we need older people to teach younger generations, that's not the part we need taught. We don't need formal teaching necessarily. What we need taught is the experiences, the experiential knowledge, the customs, the ways to behave at pagan festivals. We need to learn about trade culture. We need to learn about communal spaces. We need to learn about consent and respecting each other in person. We also need to have rites of passage, initiations, first blood ceremonies, those kinds of things and mysteries that you only get when you are experiencing it, that are so individual, it's difficult to do on the internet.
Um, I agree with that. No, 25 years ago, I started witch school, still around 25 years later. But it was the same reason. We were growing so quickly and so fast that there was not enough teachers out there. They were too far scattered. They were too goth. And the second thing was that they were disappearing. People don't know the 90s was a real expansion in the United States. We had a good economy. We had a great economy. And people were
Mm-hmm.
moving about all about, but it also left people very lonely. It was really one of the places I think you see festivals really starting, but people were also losing their local families because they were moving into new cities, new places, new spaces. And we started up on doing internet as a way to kind of fill in and fill in and fill spaces. But now it's become I and now I'm on the other side of it. I'm still very big into the internet. I'm about to do some more stuff, but I do feel that it did give you a sense of being in the community that wasn't full. And that's something that I'm hoping to see more of in the future. Uh,
Yeah, and there's a lot of good to be had on the internet, on online spaces, on Discord groups. There is a
mhm,
way that that connects us, but we've lost the other half of that, for that younger generation. For the people in their teens and 20s, internet access, they've got that covered. But
mhm.
the in person skills is where they're struggling with. And the teaching we need is not, not formal teaching,
That's,
but more personal, more hands on.
and that leads us like with Pagan Pride. Now, Pagan Pride took a hit during the COVID years.
Mhm.
because they got shut down. A lot of it
Yeah,
because of it.
completely. The organization nationally
Hmm.
um, actually shut down for a little while, and then Kansas City as well. All was lost when that happened. The Kansas City Pagan Pride organization.
And this last year was the first time, like in 5 years, that you brought it back, awakened
I
it.
believe so. Yeah. So the first
29.
year in a while, we had to start from scratch to make this happen, but it all went surprisingly very smoothly. Um,
And I think those type of events, I really do like Pagan Pride. I haven't been a big fan
mhm.
of Pagan Pride for a while, and I'm hoping it does make a resurgence. Certain parts of the area in the country, like in Nashville, it's a big thing. You see it in other spaces, and yours was fantastic last year. The ones that Kansas City held,
Thank you.
beautiful park. It was a beautiful park, good setup, lots of space to both talk versus having the band always hit you, some of that sort of thing. So it was well arranged. And you're planning again this year?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have the dates yet, but last year we had myself, Katarina Elaine, and then Elena McKenzie and Kathleen, known as Kat DeFries, who put it together. So we
Hmm.
were the co-facilitators of the event.
Hmm.
This year, me and Elena are talking a lot more, trying to iron out details and improve it for the next year. It should be
Hmm.
at the same space. It will be in different dates likely, but it is a necessary outer court, I would say, event to have in any city. It also provides a lot of motivation. We had groups kind of coming out of the works that were either newly formed or just hadn't practiced or done anything in a really long time, that were motivated by pagan pride to come out and do community rituals and offer things and have info tables. And we need that event where everyone can come and network. We need that event where everyone can touch base with each other, where you can see all aspects of the community kind of represented in one place, if only briefly. And briefly is probably better. I think if we got all those people together for a full week, they would tear each other apart. But but because just they're just very fierce, pagans can be, and very
Oh
independent and
yeah.
wild. Uh, but having that touchstone event and then allowing those new people and those younger people to find it very public, it's very visible, so that they can start their journey there and then go to different areas of the community depending on what they're seeking, is so necessary. And we lost it for a long time, and I understand why we did. There were a lot of hurdles, but I can't over overexpress the importance of having a pagan pride style event. It doesn't have to be pagan pride, but
Oh no.
the same gist.
Um, Absolutely. I agree with you. And we saw, and the truth is, we saw some of this in the 90s. A lot of people
Mhm.
are equating the community of today with the community of the 90s.
Ooh.
And it's like, okay, very different types of communities. We have
Hmm.
one of the biggest things I tell people is I fought to get us media attention.
Hmm.
Today we own our own media attention, and that
Yeah.
change has been so amazing. But at the same time, we're not in the mainstream media the way we were before. We aren't fighting to be recognized in the mainstream media anymore. I feel like we've withdrawn into our own systems.
Hmm.
Um, we're more communicating more one-on-one through TikTok, through Facebook, through other types of means. Just like our own social broadcasting, I'm on 17 different channels broadcasting. And I want to
Yeah.
thank everybody who watches us as we're going to do so. But for you, so we talked about where you'd like to see the community go. How can we help you? What is it that you'd like to go, and how can we help you?
I think a lot of elders, time goes by very quickly over the years,
Hmm.
and a little bit in their minds, they still remember the community that was 15 years ago, 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and they've just been kind of in their homes, not paying a lot of close attention, and they don't realize that that community in the past 15 or 20 years, at least in this area, completely disintegrated, and that there's nothing left for the young people. And so I kind of almost need them to wake up, and come back out into the community and do the thing that they were doing before, not necessarily like running things, right?
Hmm.
But like advising others how to do it, telling their personal stories about back in the day when they ran Pagan Pride, and offering initiations and rites of passage that are not available to people, because so few people in my generation, I think, even had those experiences.
Um, Actually, for us, it's been, even in our tradition, which has been
Hmm.
heavily internet, we train it, we have these illustrations. And we've
Hmm.
gone from having one national one to do the initiations to now lots of locals. Hmm? Smaller events be so that people can get together. I think it is important that they do because because as an Xer, I'm starting to get up there and I'm starting
Hmm.
to feel it and I'm wanting to see more teachers and I'm very fortunate. I've gotten to know a lot of people, but I do see these gaps and you're one of the people who have been filling it in and giving us a different version of the community, a version that can
Yeah, and
persist.
it's a struggle, but we need to realize that the next generations do not have the opportunities that we have. They have some better opportunities in the sense that, they're not struggling to find books about this. They're not struggling to find classes about this. They have groups on the internet that they can connect with, and I know that a lot of elders were lucky to find, good books. They
Hmm.
didn't have a lot of access to information, so there are those things that we have definitely fixed, and we have done a lot to fix consent culture. We have done a lot to, remove predators, remove fascism, promote inclusion. We've done a really good job of that in Kansas City specifically. I know other
Hmm.
areas are still working towards that and still need to work towards that, but we need the older people to think about how these young people don't have the same opportunities. Some of it's economic. They don't have the same opportunities financially. That's a lot of it. So if you want that shower house in your local pagan campground to be fixed up, and you want that same experience to be available for young people, you may have to go take a look at that, and you may have to help fund a little maintenance.
Yeah, and that's it. Paganism. Ooh. Hasn't been a tight society. We haven't been a dues society as a whole. So there is not that idea of the trusts and other things that
Mhm.
normally you see growing in multi generations.
Yeah.
And also, I
Well,
said,
and yeah, because of that, we don't have, we don't always have the strong economics because we're so worried about taking advantage of each other in that way, which is noble, which is very noble. We don't want to do tithe. We don't want to demand money from people. We don't want to ask heavily for donations. We feel like we're imposing on others, which is understandable. I have been careful about the way I collect donations. I'm always a little worried that someone's going to think I'm a grifter. Um, and that makes sense. But also, we do need to find a way to refocus on putting money in the community and fixing up our spaces and our groups and paying for things that need pay for. It's just practical.
so one suggestion to all of you that are listening, do not throw out your book collections. I've seen this now over and over again. You have the elders, don't throw them out because our books are becoming precious because there is more and more
Mhm.
pagans, more and more people coming on. The older books are just, I've seen them go for like if you got a decent blue book booklet, right?
Mhm.
Especially that, they're valuable. I mean, to the point of hundreds of dollars for some people. And a lot of
Yes.
and so a lot of people don't realize it. These handwritten diaries are very important to go into libraries. So there
Mhm.
is this, as we talk about the elders having been disconnected, they're also having their history destroyed. The temple that I belonged to as a
They
kid,
are.
Temple of Sacred Stones, not one piece of it is put together. No one knows where it's at anymore. I
Mhm.
mean, and that was the biggest temple in Chicago for 20 years. And yet,
Yeah,
no.
and it's that neglect. It's, I think on some level people got comfortable. They got
Hmm.
comfortable and they just kind of thought, well, this is great. This will last forever. And they walked away. Or they had an interpersonal conflict. They had
Hmm.
a conflict with someone And they never considered that their actions of like removing themselves were going to cause that thing to just slowly die. Or maybe they did, and at the time they didn't care because they were younger, right? Maybe they were being spiteful. And now that they're a little older, they're thinking, well, I do want to preserve that history. Whatever, we forgive you. Come back and help us rebuild it. And like, so yeah, there is a lot that's just being lost. I can attest, having worked in Aquarius books for many years, that
Hmm.
the quality of pagan books uh, is slowly degrading. And I think a lot of people are catching on to that now, especially now that we have that kind of fast Amazon publishing option, and just the direction that the publishing companies have gone. We have all of these books that, like, they don't even have table of contents anymore, so you can't use pagan books for reference the way you used to. They don't have an index. They are required to write a certain amount to get the book published, but a lot of it just becomes fluff because they have a quota they have to fill, so you end up with books that the information is just not good quality. And that's why those old books are valuable. And on some level, as the community grew, you could say that that fluffiness, that enshittification happened a little bit everywhere. And we
Hmm.
need people to come back and fill in the stuff that we've lost, and save the stuff and let us know what the history is and help us rebuild that stuff. And I know that a lot of older people don't have a lot of energy for that, but we're not necessarily asking for the energy. You can let the young people do the volunteer work. You can let the young people do leading. Let young people lead things. They're not going to do it right all the time. They're going to mess up. That's part of the journey. But you can let them do that. We need the advice. We need the history.
I agree. I agree with that. I agree with that. Well, I think, wow, there's a lot to think about with what you just said there. I think I'm going to make sure some of the elders I'm talking to pay attention to this. Uh,
I'm mean to my elders. I'm rude to them. I really do call them out, and it's it's a but we have a pretty good relationship for the most part. So
oh, sure. I mean, that's part of it, being honest, being human, realize that everybody's
mhm.
human. I think that's one of the things I see a lot of is that from the celebrity culture that we've got side by side. I mean, we do have a celebrity culture in America that is akin
Yes,
to, and I say it's pharaoh worship. It's the same we've always seen. It's a Roman emperor worship. It's the idea that a single person is can have almost demigod-like powers in the eyes of the world. And I think we try to do that too much with our own elders, who by far rejected that role. Hmm?
hmm. Yeah, I've had some interesting discussions about that recently with one of the other leaders in town who runs the Pagan Hangout. It's sort of a new meetup that happens at Pawn and Pint in Kansas City every
Hmm.
Tuesday. He runs the Pagan Hangout, and the discussion is like, we don't want to become cults of personality. And our elders didn't like that hero worship. They didn't like being put in that position, which I
Hmm.
understand. I am in that position. There is a lot of drawback to being a community figure and having the eyes of the community on you all of the time. To be fair, I grew up in it, so I'm used to it. Um but the discussion concluded between me and him that if we don't do a little of that, like, there's really no way to build and maintain community without it. Because you need these people that, even on a small level, have a lot of friends, and they bring all their friends to the volunteer day. You need these people that have a little bit of an appeal, a little bit of popularity, and you just need it to be used in a way that is helpful and ethical and fun and isn't taking advantage of anyone. So I think we don't always have to fear a big personality as long as they're not hurting anyone. I think it's okay to encourage the younger generation to have their big personalities and kind of support them and make a space where everybody can kind of be that and be encouraged and be supported.
And I think that's a great statement. I want to thank you for doing this interview today. So I give you the last word. Any last word? That you made a beautiful statement there. But you get the last word.
Yeah, let me plug some of the things going on in
Mhm.
the Kansas City area. So, yeah, Temple Scarlet is the Sacred Sexuality Retreat. It's a 4-day retreat that I run twice a year. I do one in Kansas, typically the Gaia Retreat Center in the fall. But in this spring, coming up in May over Memorial Day weekend, I will be running the Temple Scarlet Retreat at Oak Spirit Sanctuary, and that's in Missouri. So that is a place where St. Louis witches can come out to that, and
Mhm.
Missouri pagans can come out to that and enjoy that experience. And we will be doing Pagan Pride again in the fall, of course. So look out for that if you're in the Kansas City area. It's just a single day event. And then Viking Fest is definitely something to keep your eye on as it's growing. We had 1,200 for the Viking Fest second year this year. It is well supported in structure and finances by the LARP and gamer community. So that's kind of the community we're able to work with to make sure that this is really successful. And all these events are worth coming out to. If you are interested in my newsletter as well, subscribe to that. I've got some links going up on my social media site. It's $3 a month, and I will print and mail you a newsletter. Very old school. But it's becoming sort of a thing that the younger people think is very cool and very vintage to get old school mail. So think about subscribing to that. And last but not least, just consider the younger generations all that they're missing out on right now, and consider how you can potentially fill in those gaps. And if you are of those younger generations, reach out and ask questions. Ask all the questions. You might not even know what the questions are that you should be asking, but just find people with experience and ask them everything. Let them tell you their life story, because that's where you're going to learn the most. That's how I did it.
There you go, and there you can. So you can find Katarina. She's out in the Kansas City area, but she's out on the internet. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when that used to be a joke. The idea of the internet. Now it's
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And with that,
I
and
got
we'll be
templescarlet.com and all my social media pages under Katarina Elaine.
there. You go. So there we go. So we'll be back again with Katarina sometime this year. I expect sooner than later because I think she has a lot to say. And
Mm-hmm.
thank you for watching. And we'll be back with more interviews on the Ed the
Bye,
Pagan
Ed.
Show.